I am Nicholas, a freshman at Syracuse University, which is not in the safest area. I recently went through a breakup with my first girlfriend and got back into online dating. I was using Hinge when I met Stephanie, a blonde girl who also attended Syracuse and shared similar interests like reading and going to the movie. We even had a matching sense of humor. I suggested a movie date, and she agreed. Stephanie asked me to meet her at a specific location near campus and promised to pick me up. At 9 p.m., I waited at the designated corner, and Stephanie asked me to share my location. However, a car approached me and stopped, but it wasn't Stephanie. Instead, it was an old man who asked what I was doing alone there, which was strange. He asked if I was waiting for Stephanie, and I confirmed. He then introduced himself as Stephanie's father and offered to give me a ride to her. I was skeptical as he looked older than I expected a father of Stephanie's age to be. I firmly asked why he didn't inform me that he would be picking me up, and he replied that he didn't trust a stranger meeting with his daughter and wanted to meet me first. However, I was not convinced and decided to walk away. The man started shouting, but I continued walking in the opposite direction of his car. I heard his car moving, but he drove straight and turned left, so I felt relieved. I continued walking towards campus, but when I reached the corner of the block, I noticed the same car parked on the side of the road with its lights off. I quickly looked into the window as I passed, feeling uneasy. However, the car's windows were tinted, so I couldn't see inside. I tried to act normal and continued walking. I received a text from the person claiming to be Stephanie, asking why I didn't get in the car with her father. I ignored the message and kept walking, occasionally looking back to see if the car was following me. At an intersection, I turned right and ran towards campus. I made it back to campus, panting, and started walking towards my dorm. I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but I wasn't sure if it was just paranoia. When I heard the sound of broken glass being kicked, I knew I was being followed. I quickly ducked down behind a van and stopped to listen for the footsteps, which were coming from a few cars away. I realized I was still sharing my location with Stephanie, or the man I met earlier. When I saw him approaching from between two cars across from me, he yelled something, but I couldn't understand what he said. He was an old man, probably in his 60s, so I was confident I could outrun him if needed. I sprinted and lost him easily, finally making it back to my dorm room. My roommate was absent, so I had no one to share my experience with. However, when I lay down in bed, I received another text from the man, and it was alarming. He wrote an obscenity-laden message, threatening to strangle me. I took a screenshot of the text as evidence. I replied to the text, thanking him for the threat and informing him that I was going to the police. I then blocked his number and saved the conversation as proof. I hope to eventually take the screenshot and conversation to the authorities and hope that they can take appropriate action. When I was 18, I worked part-time as a janitor at my high school during the summer. My shifts could be from 9 a.m. to 12 a.m., varying depending on how much money I needed. Often, I was responsible for locking up the building when the older janitors had gone home. At that time, the school had yet to install cameras in every hallway. One night, my supervisor Tom had to leave early, leaving me to complete my shift and lock up for the night. He told me to text him if I needed anything, which was a usual request. I appreciated being left alone because I would do a minimum of work and spend the rest of my shift on my phone or leave early and still get paid for the full shift. I took advantage of the situation. Before Tom left, he asked me to bring all the extra seats from the gymnasium to the basement storage room. I decided to do that task before going home. Carrying a stack of 6 chairs, I headed to the basement storage room. The lighting was poor, which added to the unkempt feel of the basement that resembled a warehouse more than a school's basement. There were several art mannequins covered by paint cloths, which looked like large blankets, and it seemed that all of the school's art supplies were stored there. After placing the chairs with the rest, I went back to the gym to grab more. Upon returning, I noticed that one of the mannequins was uncovered, which I knew was covered just minutes prior. I texted Tom and informed him that I thought someone was in the basement. He asked for clarification, and I explained that one of the art cloths had been moved. He responded by saying that no one else should be there. I also noticed a cloth tucked in the corner of the room, outside of the central light source, covering something. I started to cautiously approach the cloth, and as I got closer, I realized that something was moving under it. It was evident that there was someone hiding there. I quickly ran back up the stairs and locked the basement door. I sent a text to Tom informing him that someone was hiding in the basement. He told me to call the police, but I asked him to come back, as he had only left 10 minutes earlier. He refused, insisting that I face the person myself. I nervously entered the basement again, but the cloth was now lying flat on the floor, and whoever was hiding under it was gone. But the scariest part was yet to come. As I stood in the storage room, I heard loud metallic thuds from above my head. I gazed upwards and noticed dents appearing in the big air vents above me. Someone was squeezing through the main deck, and then suddenly stopped right above me, making loud banging noises as if they were trying to break open the floor of the vents. I was completely bewildered, but I knew I had enough. I rushed up the stairs, locked the school, and headed home. I informed Tom of a portion of what happened the following day, saying that I thought I saw something in the corner, but it was gone when I went back. I stated that there was nothing else I could tell, as it was my final week working there and was no longer my concern. I was taking care of my grandma's house for a weekend while she went to Florida with her church friends. I was sleeping in the guest bedroom next to hers. The room had 2 twin beds, which my brother and I used to sleep in during our sleepovers at Grandma's. I took the bed near the window, but before I went to sleep, I double-checked that all the doors were locked. Although it was early, I couldn't fall asleep right away. With nothing much to do at Grandma's, I spent an hour on my phone watching videos and texting people. Suddenly, I thought I heard a woman's voice outside saying, "Hello." I left the bed and cautiously approached the front door, trying to listen closely. The voice kept repeating, "Hello," every 10 seconds. As I got closer to the door, I realized that's where the voice was coming from. My grandma's door doesn't have a peephole, but the windows in her dining room provided a clear view of the front porch. I went over to the window to see who was outside. I tried to look through the plastic blinds without being noticeable, but I must have failed because the woman on my grandma's porch saw me. She had a strange smile on her face as she said, "Hello." The woman was older, in her late 50s or early 60s, and there was something unsettling about her appearance. I felt uneasy and moved away from the window. I wondered if she was one of my grandma's friends, but it was midnight. Why would anyone come to the door and not ring the bell or knock? Why was she just standing there repeating hello? I was disturbed by the situation. I returned to the guest bedroom and closed the door, no longer hearing the woman's voice. I couldn't help but wonder who she was and why she had left. I started texting my friends and sister about the strange encounter, but after a while I started to calm down. My sisters suggested calling my grandma, but I knew she was likely asleep and rarely checked her phone. Just as I was starting to relax, I heard a loud banging on the window. This sudden noise sent me into fight or flight mode, causing a pain in my chest. The banging eventually stopped, but it left me on edge. I heard the woman say hello again. This time I had the courage to pull up the blinds and confront her. To my horror, she was still there with a creepy smile on her face. I shouted at her that I was calling the police. I quickly lowered the blinds and ran to the living room to search for the woman. I then locked myself in the upstairs guest bedroom. Although I threatened to call the police, I didn't want to. I just wanted to wait it out. I hid under the covers in the bed until I finally mustered the courage to check outside the window. The creepy woman was gone. The next morning, I informed my grandma about the incident, who became distressed and panicked upon hearing the news. I listened as my grandma described a strange encounter she had at the grocery store a few days prior. A woman, about 10 years younger than her, kept smiling at her for no reason. Although I wasn't sure if it was related to the previous night's events, I couldn't ignore the eerie feeling it gave me. My grandma, who is 75 and has started to lose some of her mental sharpness, tends to exaggerate things, so I take what she says with a grain of salt. However, her panic-stricken voice when she told me about the woman in the store still sends chills down my spine. I can't shake the thought of whether it could have been the same person. My name is Alyssa. At 16 years old, I lived with my mother in a small, sketchy apartment in the Bronx, New York. The area was known for its shady characters, and it was scary to walk alone at night. Our apartment was on the 7th floor, and we lived in the second-to-last unit on the hall. The owner of the last apartment always sat outside his door, perched on the windowsill. He would always make eye contact with me whenever I entered our apartment, even when I was with my mother. My mother warned me to stay away from him, but we never knew his name. He was a black man in his 60s with very little hair, but what remained was gray. He always had an expressionless look on his face when he looked at me. Then, one day, every time I saw him in the hallway, he would say hello and call me by name, making the situation even creepier. I was unsure of how he obtained my name, but I never questioned him. On one night when my mother was working the night shift, I was home alone. I arrived at 9:00 p.m. and saw that the neighbor was, as usual, sitting on the windowsill with an unchanging expression. When I unlocked the door, instead of greeting me, he asked if my mother was working that night. In hindsight, I regret telling him yes. He simply nodded and I went inside, closing the door behind me. I had had enough of his creepiness for one night. After getting home, I freshened up, had a snack, did laundry, and took a shower. I heard a strange rumbling noise while taking a shower, which made me concerned about someone potentially being in my apartment. After getting out of the shower, I heard another similar noise coming from my bedroom. I quickly put on some clothes from the bathroom and searched my room but couldn't find anyone. However, I noticed a small hole in the wall and approached it for a closer look. To my horror, I saw someone's eye looking back at me from the other side of the hole. I was so scared that I fell backwards, realizing that the wall separated my apartment from my creepy neighbors. I had a sudden realization of what the grumbling noise in the bathroom must have been. I rushed back to the shower and felt along the wall until I found another tiny hole, identical in size to the one in my room. The creepy neighbor had drilled these 2 holes, possibly more, to spy on me. I called my mom and told her, and while I was on the phone with her, there were knocks on the door. It was the neighbor, who kept yelling to open the door. My mom instructed me to call the police, and she tried to get home as soon as possible. Fortunately, the Bronx police responded quickly, and there were officers at my apartment door within 5 minutes. My mom arrived half an hour later. She pressed charges against the neighbor for stalking, invasion of privacy, and criminal mischief. The apartment building also evicted the man, and the holes were patched up at his expense. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and share the video. The best is yet to come.